part of the Blue Classroom Part 2. Come in.
I have on my calendar that's in right 143.
Oh, no, yeah, power. Okay, you're here. You're here. So a month ago, yeah, we talked about, we had a Blue Classroom Part 1, and in that session, basically me, one person talking for an hour, talked about what Blue Classroom is, how it works, and how even it started, and why it works. We talked about some theoretical foundations that can support this kind of new pedagogical model, and we also, at the end of the session, we discussed about some new strategies we can use to make it happen. And today, I'm glad that I have Dr. Chile and Dr. Strupper here to join us to share their experience in working their classrooms and how they did it and how they think it is beneficial to students and what kind of challenges they probably have had in this new model. So at the end of the session, we will open up for discussion. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Any concerns you may have. So I probably now would just have two of them start. Okay. Terry, you want to start first?
You can catch your breath.
I'm going to go whenever you are.
We can also just do this more informally too. I don't know if you've tried anything like this, but we have had trouble with our intro psych classes. Like probably most of the large survey classes, we have a lot of problems with fail, drop, withdrawals. We have problems with students just being overwhelmed with the amount of information. And I've been teaching intro psych along with other psych for 30 years. Stopped for a number of years, came back to it, and had just really not pleased with the large lecture model. And our large classes go anywhere from like 60 to 200. They teach a 200-student class. And it's the same thing. It's like, if you're a dynamic lecturer, you can keep the attention of them for a little while, but you're not really sure they're getting the material. They don't. I was fairly sure they weren't getting the vast majority of the material. I know many, if not most, really weren't reading the book. Hell, they didn't even know the book. Most. I would discover it after, Okay, so I don't have to go through that. The necessity being the mother of invention coincided with my teaching intro online and using the really good technology and systems that the publishers had for the large introductory cycle with a number of online classes for I think 2 or 3 years. And by the end of that time, I was convinced that I could use a lot of that material with my in class group. And so I invented the flipped classroom. And you thought you would learn it down to a program idea. But I basically came up with this idea that I would have them do the vast majority of their material online, and then I could use the in-class time for basically getting them excited about psychology, what I was hoping to do, but also to use the time for more activities, more in-depth discussion, interactive stuff, and better testing, make the testing process educational too. And then I discovered when I started it that there was a whole theory behind it. It had a name, it was called the flipped classroom, and I just never
So is that like Columbus discovering America?
Yeah, I discovered it, and I discovered the flipped classroom. But let me tell you how I've done mine, and I'll just do this kind of quickly. And again, what really you have to have, I think, unless you've got the ability to put this building yourself, is good technological or online material. Here's the basic assumption of my course. Basic assumption for the intro site is that they are going to do 4 days or 5 days, Wednesday afternoon until Monday afternoon, get the core material, the content online. And they're going to get it from the ebook, they're going to get it from things I'm going to show you, adaptive learning tests, videos, labs. All of those come from the publisher. And if you're teaching any one of the big major sort of survey courses, you're going to have publishers fighting to have you use their system. So I'm going to show you what if you don't have one of those courses, if you're thinking of doing this in another, you're going to have to build the content yourself. But anyway, what they do is they get the material online, and they get credit for it. They get a point for they don't get a point for reading the test. That's the only thing. But you could. You can give them actual points for the reading of the test, for watching online lectures, which I have them do, for doing the video stuff. And when they come to class on Monday, they have done it. They've done 8 points. They've done probably about 6 hours worth of work. And I know how many hours they're working because I can see how long they're spending doing it. So they are very, very prepared. Most, I would say, between 80 and 95% of the large classes in any week, any Monday, will have done all of that. So they're coming to class like knowing the chapter for the first time in my in 30 years of teaching. I can assume the majority have it. And so that frees me again to do these other things that we talked about later. But I thought I would show you just a couple of how the actual my class is set up for their online stuff. This is through the portal from Macmillan for our textbook. Again, all the major textbook publishers have them. And we're working now to do these activities through Blackboard. They can be integrated into Blackboard. But I'll show, right now I've been using it for their particular, their portal. So the e-text is here. And so, just like any e-textbook, we're going to do anxiety disorders. They would read the text, and this is where it is. The next thing, let me show you my lecture. So I upload lectures that I have recorded, in this case in Adobe Presenter. You can't hear it, but it's... Can you hear it?
It's not connected direct.
It's okay. I mean, I'm lecturing here. I do have some with me camcorded into it as well. I'm switching these over to Camtasia because we don't have a license to do this. They're looking at me like I'm committing copyright law because we don't have a license. But anyway, they watch the slides. It's about a half-hour to 40-minute lecture. I just lecture over the PowerPoint mostly. Which I thought wouldn't, honestly, I don't like PowerPoint lectures in general. I don't use PowerPoint when I teach regularly because I always find them deadly dull, but it's the only way to really have done it here. But the students really report they like it. And I had a student yesterday say who's doing really well. He failed the first two tests. And we had like 13 tests in there. We have a test every week. He's gotten A's on every one of them since and totally changed how he studied. And he said like he listens to the lecture like 3 times. And he stops it and starts it and takes notes.
Yeah, and I think your point is really well taken, because even when we teach in the classroom, at least a dozen kids are bringing up their little tape recorders and saying, do you mind if I tape record you?
Exactly.
So they really appreciate it already being recorded for them so they can go back to it.
Exactly. They really like that. And I don't have to honestly do the same lecture over and over and over again. Okay, so that is that. Every week I have one lecture, and I have the PowerPoints that they can use. I'll tell you in advance, I give open book tests. That's the second part of the strategy, is that what I do is test them on all applied items. And I guess I can show you some of those. But like on anxiety, like I would have the anxiety disorder, I'd have, Mary has trouble catching her breath and her heart is pounding periodically, and then she feels this overwhelming sense of doom and death, blah, blah, blah. Which of the following would be the best diagnosis for her? And then you could just give you the diagnosis, and that would be panic disorder, for example. But they're all items like that. None of them are items they can look up. And so I give a 30-item multiple choice test every Wednesday, and they can use all their notes, all their PowerPoints that accompanied the lecture. And I gotta tell you, it's amazing to watch them taking tests because they're open book. They're really involved. They're not just memorizing and regurgitating. They're very active, and it's great to watch them learning while they're taking the test. They're not learning the material for the first time because they've already done it. But what they're doing is using it for support. We also give them a comprehensive final at the end. It's not open book, closed book. It's a departmental final, and we can see how they do. Then compare, in a format that doesn't have the book. My students do better than that. That's another story. There's a lab. In this case, their model is called the Psych Investigator. Oh no! Oh yeah, there we go. Oh, okay. Well, you can't hear it, but what it is most of them are like a psych experiment that they would be involved with. Again, all the publishers have something like this. So she gives a little intro. They do an investigation, which is an experiment where they'll ask the student to do something. They're actively involved. These are different people with different disorders. And then investigation. And I can see if they're racing through it, because I can see how long they're online. I tell them that, I check periodically. They don't tend to do that, because this is somebody you can't hear it, so. But they'll be given some sort of a test. So they'll have to diagnose him or something like that. You can't hear, so I won't spend time on that showing. But so that's something else they do. Then we have videos that either I upload from my own library, but they've got, this particular publisher has lots of really good videos. So here's an example. And so they watch the video. The videos are between 4 and 8 minutes long. And at the end of the video, they have a video assessment. It's like 3 items, but I can see. Oh, they can't do it because the time was passed for that one. Okay. But if they did it in time, they could, by that Monday. And that's the key again, is give them a small window of time to do all the activities, after which they don't get any points for doing it. They can still look at the stuff and study for the test with it, but they get no points. And I am ruthless with that, to make sure that on Mondays they come in having done their 4 to 6 hours worth of stuff. And then one more thing I want to show you is the adaptive learning part of this. And this is really neat. And again, all of the publishers have this. And what this is, okay, so there are students who are going to read the text, but they won't get it. But there's also students that won't read the text, or they skim it, or they're not, it's a textbook. So these are modules that provide tests. This one's called Learning Curve, but they provide a test Where is it? Am I missing where? Oh, I didn't get it done. Preview activities with kids. I'm sorry, there we go. Okay, so blank is characterized by excessive worry accompanied by 3 or more of the following: restlessness, fatigue, poor concentration, irritability. I don't know, I'll say anxiety. Your answer is being checked as you type. So far it's not correct. Let's say generalized anxiety. Now, is it? Oh, there it is. Agoraphobic fear, having a panic attack, it would be. Okay, so if it's correct, they tell you it's correct, and I think I could take a well-deserved break after 2 items, or I could go on to the next item. And the average duration of a major I'm going to get it wrong then. Oh, yeah. Oh, I was right. Et cetera. There's also, they give multiple choices. Now, here's what makes it adaptive learning. It takes too long to show you. But if I miss items, then they will go back and give me an easier version of that item. If I get it right, I'll see items like it again, but they'll be harder. So if you have not read the material, it teaches it to you. Basically, this is a way to learn the chapter that it does it interactively. And if you have read the chapter and you know it really well and you want to get through this sooner, it goes much quicker. They'll give you a couple of items, they get harder just to make sure you know it. But so they would ask me that thing about panic attacks and major depressive disorder maybe 2-3 times. If I get them right, I'll never see them again, and I can get through that segment, in a much shorter time. So the students have 2 strategies: to read the material first and take it and do faster. Don't read it first and learn it as they go along. And it's really their choice. It's kind of how they learn best. I told them it's not a wrong way to do it. But it's wonderful because it's interactive. And it's what you tell your students all the time: don't just read and underline. That's passive learning. This really makes for, interactive learning, learn by doing. So those are the main components of each week. This is what takes them about, like I said, 3 to 6 hours to do between the lectures and the videos, the adaptive learning. Then in class is what I do. I'll bring, current research and do a small mini lecture on that with some of my own stash of videos that are really good and related to the areas I'm interested in. I'll do activities with them in class. We can have more discussion. One of the things I can't do, I'm looking forward to hearing what you've done, Sharon, is that with a very large class, part of the problem is we are defined by the seats we have. So every class I've taught since I've done this 3 times has been where the seats are locked down. And so my plan to get them in small groups and do activities is shot. Again, I just can't do it here easily, if at all. So I just use it more to do it more inspiring and fun type lectures that I wouldn't have had time to do before. So that's kind of how my classes are. So they take a test on Wednesday, and then as soon as they finish with their test, they go back and their material is ready to go for the next week. We have 13 weeks of this, and so they are learning a lot of psychology. So we can talk later about kind of personal experiences.
So I have to tell you that I discovered this attraction. So let me ask you folks, what discipline or what subjects are you teaching? And are any of you actually doing this with classrooms? And if you are, what problems are you having? I want to find that out first. This is a fast 10 seconds. Tell me what you got.
Education. I do hybrid course, so I use the in-class time for the processing and the hard stuff.
Okay. What education are you doing?
At psych, sometimes for technology.
Okay. George, what are you doing?
Me?
The guy behind you?
Information systems, and for the most part, we run gamut from the generalized large classroom academic course for capability to very specific courses on computer programming, system analysis, and all that.
So are you doing any kind of flipped classroom type stuff at all?
Yeah, I have been for quite some time, actually, so I really think everything was
Any problems that you're having?
The biggest problem is, quite frankly, if you don't have the resources from the publisher, you're really doing a lot of work, and there just isn't enough time to get it all done the way I'd love to have it done. That's one problem. Publishers are beginning to come more online, but they're lagging a bit, but they're finding out, yeah, we have to do this in order to make sales. But then again, it's sort of like the old Microsoft Word versus WordPerfect war. One has this a little better the next time around. Now the next time around, the other one has something that's a little better, and you just don't feel like you want to switch back and forth all the time.
Right.
And then last but not least, what do you do? When they've done all this stuff supposedly on their own, and they come into the classroom, and we're teaching some very technical stuff, and to try to engage them, to get them to get involved in discussions about it, maybe go a little deeper. If they haven't done that, that session is wasted. You end up coming back to revisiting what they should have done and didn't do.
Right. What about you?
So I'm a Dr. Richard. I teach organization behavior and leadership. My attempt to use my classroom time more wisely. My challenges are exactly what you highlighted. The physical constraints of the classroom are a huge barrier for me. And then the other thing is just simply when it's more applied activities, when the students don't quite connect the dots that what I'm asking them to do is practice the concepts that they've read about, or maybe that I've highlighted even before we do the activity.
Okay.
I'm struggling with different ways to get them to read and be prepared for what we're doing in class. Relations is part of it. I think it's what I would call it.
Okay. And are you doing it at all yet? You are doing
Yes,
it?
I am doing some of it, not all of it, no.
Biology,
You don't do anything?
no flipping class.
No.
The challenging thing in biology is that how we get math portion of class. That's the issue.
You can
Can't
help me.
flip.
I can help you with that.
Well, we talked about some online exercise and things like that,
Right.
that we would prefer them to have hands-on with teachers. You
Right.
could get a couple of exercise in, maybe 3 or 4 out of 15, but we never be able to get all of it. So if the balance between whether you want to just spend all the energy and time doing 3 or 4 exercise online, you can't get it all in.
At nursing, teaching the family nurse practitioner program, and when they're on campus, we really try to make it very interactive. Case studies and kind of that first classroom approach. This difficult concept to get them prepared to do that. So that's also my answer that way as well.
Okay.
With her. And
Ditto?
Ditto.
Okay.
Which is, we're actually teaching those in the same class.
So the reason why I wanted to kind of go through that is because I kind of feel like people are coming from different places for this. And really that is what I heard. First off, when people hear about the flipped classroom, they automatically assume it means that it's an online class. And that's not what it is. We use online materials to help us facilitate a flipped classroom. But really, it's not an online course. Now, the reason why I say I discovered it is because I'm a product of online learning. I've done some of my degrees in online forms 100%, and some of my degrees as face-to-face traditional. And so I know what it means to do an online course, and I know what it means to teach a 100% online course as well as a hybrid. But I'm also a science educator, and the science education realm talks about how do we get students to engage and talk, because the whole reform of education is about getting them to talk and to engage in their learning rather than listening to a talking head. And I prefer not to lecture. I don't like lecturing. I hate being the lecturer because for the most part, I know it doesn't work. So we kind of have done all this and you know all this information, but one thing I should say is there was a conference recently. You might have gone to a pedagogy conference here in Indiana. Did you go to that one like a couple weeks ago? I didn't go, but I heard somebody came back and reported to me that there was a talk where they shared some research that showed brain activity of students over periods of time, over days as different kinds of activities, and they found that when they were putting electrodes on students' brains to see what kind of brain activity they had during a lecture, they actually had less activity than when they were sleeping. Less than when they were sleeping. So what is it you're doing when you're lecturing? You're putting them into a coma. So, we know that it's important. There's tons of research that shows it. We know that if they talk and they explain, they're getting much more out of it. We know this from cognitive science research, which is where I've done my work. And so we know that this is an important thing to do. But, as you mentioned, there's a lot of issues. Students don't want to do it. They don't want to be responsible. They don't follow through. It means I have to work harder. You mean you're not going to teach me? Right? All of a sudden it's your job to teach me, and you're not going to do it? That's a problem. And so the other thing is the students who do really well, especially in our degree program, have done really well through K-12 as rote learners. And now all of a sudden we're telling them, you're going to rote learn on your own, by the way. And then you're going to come to class and you do some critical thinking, by the way. And they're like, woo! So you get this crazy feeling in class and you get a lot of resistance. So, instructors then realize students aren't prepared, as we said, and they have to find the right stuff to generate discussion, as you said, and it takes more time to try to put that material together if we don't have the resources. Now, it is true, there's a ton of resources that are being developed for online materials that can be transferred to the flipped classroom. Tons of material. So it's just a matter of finding it and seeing how you can modify it for your use. And that's sort of a trick. But what I wanted to focus on was not so much what the online material was, because that's something you can find from publishers and things like that. I wanted to show you some of the strategies that happened, well, some of the strategies you talked about in the online first, and then I'm going to talk about some of the strategies face-to-face. So just briefly, students don't come prepared because they don't think they have to. They didn't buy the book, they don't want to read it, they didn't do that when you were lecturing anyway. So what makes you think they're going to do it now? So, what you have to do is you have to take away that intrinsic motivation you think they're going to have, because they don't have it. And you have to replace it with that extrinsic motivation that they've lived with all their lives, and that means a grade. And time management. You have to explain to them, you have to provide for them the structure for the time management. So giving them a day on when they have to read something is important. Giving them dates on when they have to do things is important. Structuring it for them as a regular thing is helpful, especially for our population where most of them are working. The other thing is, if you're going to give them lectures and books to read online, give them points for doing it. They read something, they answer one or two multiple choice questions, it applies to a grade. A low grade stress point, it's not a high stakes grade, but in some way it makes them feel like they're getting something for it. If they read, they think they're getting nothing for it. But the moment they have to answer some questions, they got something for it. In fact, if they miss one question, which won't change the grade in any way, if they miss 100, they probably wouldn't change the grade in any way. But if they miss that one, they're going to come back to you about how they missed that one. Hey, you know the reason. So give them those tools to keep them in the online environment. So that's some of the stuff that you want to do.
Is that random question? Because they can cheat on that.
It doesn't matter if it's cheating. It means at least they went through the material. I don't actually care if they cheated reading it. The idea is to get them to go to that book. At some point, those grades are meaningless, that it doesn't affect their grades really, it's so low stakes. All you're doing is giving them a time management structure. That's really the whole purpose of it, this part of it. So I give them quizzes that count, that are high stakes. I give them homework assignments that are high stakes, and I give them exams that are high stakes. But the reading material, where they have to have questions in it, it's a low stake, it's just to get them to do it. That's it. It's to structure them extrinsically, motivation, time management, that's all.
What I'm saying is, they can just check their friend with the answers to the question.
Sure.
Put it in, not
Sure.
read anything.
Sure, they sure could, but then they're not going to be able to do their homework or the quiz or their exam. Right, sure.
And you're still testing them on it during test time.
But, yes, you're testing them on during test time. The only purpose of it, the only purpose, is to get them motivated to do it. Now, if they find a way to cheat, they're going to do that anyway. So, I can't worry about that cheat part for that piece. I can deal with that for quizzes and exams, and there's other ways to deal with that. I'm not going to actually address that today, but you and I can talk about it later if you want. Because there are strategies to deal with that online cheating. So for this, the purpose is not a grade. It's to make them think they got a grade for it. It's to make them think about a time frame. That's it. That's all I'm doing. I found that when I do that, the students will buy the book because now they realize they have to. They will try to read it, or at least open it and skim it, or at least answer the question. So at least I'm getting them to a place where they're saying, all right, I'm going to have to be responsible for something. Besides just showing up in a class where I don't have to have any responsibility. So, the other thing is, I know that this is a big thing because if they got all this material online, I have to be available by email very quickly. So I always tell them, less than a 24-hour turnaround. If you don't hear from me within the 24 hours, please email me back or find another way that means I didn't get it. Because I'll at least email back and say, I can't talk to you right now, or I can't deal with this, can I email you, or can I meet with you, or something, so that they know I'm right there.
Do you also follow that rule on the weekend? Because we have an awful
I
lot
do.
of students who think if they send you a 10 p.m. on Saturday,
I do.
they better hear from you by Sunday
But what
morning.
you can do is you can make your own decision not to. And the reason I do is because I know that some of the students are working over the weekend, and I know that the material that they're reading may be done over the weekend. And just because I think I work 9 to 5, which I don't think my students are learning 9 to 5. So part of this is to make it easier and available for them. But that's a decision I make as an instructor. So you can say as an instructor, I won't answer email over the weekend, so if you email me on Friday after 5, don't expect to hear from me until Monday. But they have to explicitly say that, right? So I tell them, even on the weekend, it'll be 24 hours, and if it's something where I'm going to be gone, I let them know, so that they know I'm not going to make that 24-hour break. Okay, so the classroom is where the hardest part comes, I think, for the teacher. The online is the hardest part for the students. Except for putting the material to the teacher, so we talked about that. In the classroom, the hardest part is in the classroom is the hardest part because all of a sudden we have to figure out how to get them to do this. So we can look at combinations of, what we have to do is combinations of large and small groups. The groups have to constantly change. Otherwise, you get one person who's doing all the work. It's kind of that cheating issue. That cheating issue happens in class, by the way, when they talk. You got one student doing the work and everybody asking what's the answer. That's no different than if they're getting an answer online. So I have to constantly change the group. The other thing is developing a safe environment. The whole purpose of the flipped classroom is to get the students engaged in the talk. It's not to hear another lecture. It's not to go back over the book. It's not to go over the PowerPoint that you gave them online. It's not even the clicker questions that you give them that were the same ones they had when they were online. That's nothing but a repetitive motion that wastes your time and theirs. Because again, you're going to put them to sleep. The purpose of the flip is to get them talking in the class. Talking and doing. And so the way to do that is they have to have a safe environment. And that's the most difficult thing to do. Because the students come into class thinking, well, I'm not going to say anything, I'm the only student. Or, we don't get the nerd issue so much, but mostly it's, I'm the most stupid. You know, they've got so much stuff going on, that's what happens. Yeah.
Another of the issues, we have a lot of advantages. And depending on where they came from,
Their language.
they're not just language, they're just not used to participating in classes. It's almost
Absolutely.
impossible to have a class discussion.
It's a cultural difference.
Yeah,
But in
100%,
some classes,
100%.
they don't talk. In fact, I've spoken to some of the Chinese students who have said to me, we never are allowed to talk in our class.
And I had trouble
We're
getting
just
them,
not allowed to.
to open up.
But when I've gotten them to afterwards, I've always had them come back and say, I really liked it. It's difficult, but they always say, I really liked it when they come back. So it's valuable. And we know it's valuable from our research. So even if they're not doing it in their own country, we know from research it's a valuable strategy. So you have to figure out a way to get that to happen. You're going to argue with me, Doug?
No. No. My graduate course, they give me lectures on material, the same thing.
Here's the other issue. I don't know how many faculty I talk to that say, well, I don't have to really require attendance or deal with attendance because, you know, it's their responsibility. Yeah, it is, but so is reading the book. And how well we got them to do that, right? So why would you require attendance if the whole purpose is to get them thinking about what they're doing and engaging in that discussion about what's going on? How are they going to do that if they're not attending your flipped classroom discussion? So this should be a requirement. I hate to do that because when I went to my undergraduate, I worked 2 jobs and raised a family. And I couldn't afford the time to attend all my classes. And I had to do the recording of my faculty and ask them, would you mind if I do that so I can listen to your lectures? Because I couldn't be there. So I hate doing that. But at the same point, if we don't get them to attend, they're missing a part of their learning. I was highly motivated. I managed to do it, but I'm not sure most students are. So I do my best to try to encourage attendance as much as possible. I understand things can't happen or interfere. Okay, so if you're in a large classes have a hard time. We hear about the clickers. The problem with the clickers is there's still no interaction, no discussion. If you do the traditional clicker, traditional, it's funny that clickers are considered traditional now, isn't it? They're still new. But there's some ways to make a large class work where it can engage them talking. So, for instance, one way is that if you're doing that and you're doing clickers, you can give them a question and allow them to talk to the people next to them, and then have them put in their answer. They may or may not put the answer that was agreed upon with people around them, but then you have to also show what some of the results were, and then discuss that. If you're just going to do a clicker and say, oh, 33% got it wrong and moving on, then you're missing the whole point of that discussion, and you're missing that opportunity. I don't like the really large classrooms to happen very often. It's usually the place that you start with to kind of get an idea, to get a student an idea, and to build a safe environment. Like, all right, so 30% of you still don't understand it. That's okay. Let's figure it out. And then you move forward. So you're just letting them know it's okay that we don't all know. Okay? The other way is, let's say you don't have clickers, using the four-man clickers. You guys ever heard those? You have little pieces of paper, A, B, C, they hold up. Everybody holds your A, and they can hold it right here to be private, so the faculty can just sort of get an idea, a feel of about, well, let's talk about half if you got A, and so it's a four-man clicker. You don't get the same nice, pretty graph that you get with the clicker programs and things like that, but it's a workable thing if you're just gauging about where your class is. Okay? I am, let's go to this one. So I like the small groups. I missed something. I like the small groups. And so what I do is, with the small groups, I have them doing jigsaw, I have them doing small group discussions, I have them moving from place to place using whiteboards, so I'll show you some of that in a minute, real fast. But the idea is how we get some ideas. So in science, I look for discrepant events. That's one of the things I do. I can show them some events, a video clip or a demonstration, and I can say, so what do you think about this event? And then we talk about it. I can generate word problems from an equation. Here's an equation, create a word problem, and pass it on to somebody else to see if they can solve it. I discuss support of alternative theories. So I give them one theory or two different theories and ask them which would they support and why. Have a discussion on that. Interpreting the meaning of a graph. I give them a graph and say, so what does it mean? What do you think? How would you modify it? Does it represent the information you think it represents? Evaluating critiquing peer work. Sometimes it's their own peers. Other times it's samples from other classes. Here's an example of someone's work. What would you do different, or what's wrong with it, or what needs to be improved? What's good? That's another way to get them talking. And always, it has to have time frame. So these are some ways I generate topics. And I do different things each time. And then this is what I have to do to structure that. I have to provide them time limits each time. So if it's something small, I might say 3 minutes, and then I have to monitor that, make sure I stick to that. I have to keep it fast-paced all the time. As soon as I slow down, they stop engaging in talk, and all of a sudden they're talking about, hey, what did you do yesterday? You know, I watched this movie the other day. And my class is gone. It's with this room. So when I organize my students, I do it by I use cards. I use playing cards. I collect cards from different museums. So I have a whole mess of cards, you know, women in science, sharks around the world, the coolest butterflies. I have cards shaped like different planets, or, you know, like Earth, I guess, different planets are like different. So I do that. And what I do is I hand out cards randomly, and then the people who have all the fours get together, and people who have the threes get together. And then I use those to then say, okay, all the hearts are going to report. All the diamonds will lose. And so I do what's known as whiteboarding or round robin. So a whiteboard, I actually go to the Home Depot and I buy shower boards. They're about $12, the big shower boards. I ask them to cut it down, they cut it for free, and I cut them down into small boards, and I get white markers, and each group, when they do their discussion, that's where they put all the information. So then what they do is they take that board, and now we have a discussion. When I say all diamonds move, the diamonds will take that board and they'll go to a different group and tell this group what we talked about. That's one strategy of doing that, called whiteboarding, round robin. The other way is, if you wanted to develop a safe environment, a little easier, before you've done something like that, you might do round robin journaling, where they answer a question on paper. And then they pass it to their friend who says, I like it, or I don't, or I agree, or I don't. But then passes it to somebody completely randomly. So they're developing an argument or a discussion in that way. And after a while, you bring it back and say, so what do you guys think? How did it go? So that's what's round robin journaling. Jigsaw is where you have a group of people talking together, and they become sort of, they know what they're going to do, this is their specialist idea, and then you take one person from each group, and they re-talk about what they're going to do. So we all have our group, we're going to, in our group, talk about this topic, and now we're going to take one person from each group, all the hearts come together, and now they're going to look at what each group talked about, and they're going to re-discuss it and see if they all still agree. At some point, they go back to the original group and share that information. So these are just some of the classroom possibilities. Brainstorming, they sit around, they share their ideas, make and take. I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to give it to the next group has to do something with it. That's like the problem-solving one that I talked about, the make and take.
Type of room make a difference?
I'm sorry?
Type of room make a
It is definitely harder to do in the rooms that have those things, but I've done it in 103, for example. And what I do is I just sort of try to get them to move into their space. They know when they come into that room or into my classroom, they know that they're going to do group stuff. They know. It's just after the first class or two, I do large group stuff, and then after that they become a small group. And it's almost always a small group the rest of the semester, and they know. So they come in knowing they'll never sit in the same seat, they'll never be in the same group, And part of that is, in order to develop a safe environment in the classroom, everybody in the classroom has to get to know each other, and everybody in the classroom has to have a voice. And if we don't make that possible, then once you get a quick thing happening where one or two people get all this noise and this voice, and everybody else shuts down. And then the group is no good, because all they're doing is sitting there listening to a lecture from other kids. So we have to make that environment safe, even in a large classroom. I think that's the number one key, is making that safe environment. If you don't have that, the rest of it doesn't work. So I wanted to share some fast examples. I kind of mentioned them. Here's one that I've done, an example. This is an equation we've been studying. Create a word problem from the equation, write a step-by-step solution for the word problem, and keep it to the side, and then give your problem to the other group. Then, that group solves the problem, so all the words change. The next group solves the problem. Then they pass it to the next group, who corrects that second group's solution. But they also have to look at whether that first group actually wrote the problem correctly. Maybe their problem is wrong. Then it goes back to the original group, who looks at the other two groups' stuff, and they have to say, I think we did it wrong, because that's not the answer we had that either of these two groups had. And when there's a discrepancy between those, we discuss them as a class. We bring them up to the front, and the whole class talks about them. There's no one person that's had anything focused on that. It's all group stuff, so everybody feels safe. We say this as a group. Okay. The next one is, here's an example of where they might do a round-robin journaling, or they can discuss it out loud. The temperature range absolute 0 in Kelvin is theoretical. Why? What makes it theoretical? Supposedly they've done some reading on what that even means. And so now they have to kind of think about, how is it theoretical? I mean, I know what 30 degrees is. Why is 0 theoretical? And then they have to argue for whether it's possible or not, and they have to go through this discussion. So I take it from why is it theoretical, and then I extend it to, is it possible or not? Here's another one. What are the least amount of materials needed to light this light bulb? This is more of a lab type activity. If I gave you a light bulb and what do you think you have to have, so they have to create a list of the things they have to have, I give them all the materials they think they have to have, and then they have to go through trying to figure out, drawing what they think it's going to take to light a light bulb with the least amount of material. This didn't work, let's try this one. They draw it out, this didn't work, let's try this one. After a few times, we share everybody, we see what's common in those things that didn't work. And then we see how many different ways we can light a light bulb. What are all the different patterns? This is them going through something they read about, but I'll tell you, even after they read it, they can't do it. So now they've got a chance to see how it works. Here's another one, the graph I was talking about. Here's my graph. What does this graph mean? What does it represent? Each group has to come up with an actual story. Graphical representations tell a story. So they have to explain, what do they think is going on today? Why did this graph, how did this graph get produced? What were the variables that were being involved? What was changing? How was it changing? Why was it changing? So they have to give me that story, and then one of the things I mentioned is that there might be some information missing. So here they're thinking about what's missing from this graph, and then what does this graph represent in data. And then they'll share their stories, they'll walk around and share their stories with each other and see if their stories make sense. And then we kind of think about, well, which story do we think is the best and why? And you'd be surprised how many different stories you get from them.